Okay, so it's time to have a look at the transport controls on Traktor. Bear in mind we are using internal playback mode here. I'm going to load in a track into my deck here. Just talk you through these. They'll be fairly self-explanatory, so forgive us if we're showing things that you already know. Obviously, you have play here for beginning playback at the start of the current track. We have our sync button up here. What that'll do, that'll sync this deck. If I play the other deck here, I'll switch off that master, make this one master. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm now syncing deck A to deck B. And that's what that does. So it's that's one you'll probably end up using quite a lot. You have the master button here. This makes the currently loaded track the master deck for tempo syncing. So if I switch off sync here and I make this one the master, so I'll play this one. Now deck B is going to have to sync up to deck A. So you'll hear they're out of sync and they're back in sync again. So the next two buttons we have, I mentioned them briefly in the last tutorial. We have our pitch bend buttons. I'll show you how these work. These are these two buttons here. So they temporarily speed up or slow down the track. You'll see the BPM there just increasing momentarily as I do this. So let's see. So although we've synced the tracks, occasionally there might need a bit of manual nudging. So it's kind of like when you're using a CDJ and you're nudging the track forward, or you're pulling it back a little bit. That's what these buttons here do. Again, we can just sync. So you'll probably end up using those buttons quite a lot as well. Then we have our pitch control. Again, I mentioned this briefly earlier. You can operate this manually, or you can use it in predefined increments, like using these buttons here. And if you want to return to the zero pitch, the native BPM, you just double click on the pitch control fader. Then we have our cue buttons. So I'll just go back to the start. Cue, the first one. In Traktor's internal playback mode, this sets a temporary cue point, and the playback will then begin from the point at which we have dropped that cue point. So let's see. So I'm gonna set a cue point here, and you'll see that it snapped to the nearest beat. That's because we've got snap mode activated. Now this is going to be my cue point, so I just click cue. And it's as simple as that. That's only a temporary cue point though. You can make that a sort of permanent hot cue, which we'll show you how to do in a later tutorial. The other one here beside it is for is cup. This is again using internal mode. It functions the same as cue, but instead of beginning playback from the last temporary cue point, you'll see what it does here. Whereas cue stops playback and you have to hold down the button. When you hit cue, it just begins playback. And there's cue, I'm holding down the button. And cup, it begins playback. But we will of course show you some of the more advanced features of the decks, for example beat grading, beat jumping and hot cues in our later tutorials, which are all contained in these panels here. We'll also show you how to do looping as well. This was just a quick overview of the deck, so when we get to those tutorials you'll know exactly what we're talking about. So in our next tutorial we'll take a look at the mixer.